Hey folks, Sean here, and in this episode, I want to talk to you about what you think is easier to figure out how to use from a tool perspective, a hammer or a Swiss Army knife. Now, maintain that context as we go through this episode. And the reason why I asked that question is because one of those options does a very specific thing and largely one thing alone, maybe two, if you use both ends. That's the hammer. The Swiss Army knife, on the other hand, that's deliberately designed to do a whole bunch of things. So if you're unfamiliar, it's basically like a wallet type looking device, and it's got a hinged arm that swings out with, I don't know, I've seen some that are crazy. They have like 100 pieces of function. There's a screwdriver, there's scissors, there's a cutting knife, there's all kinds of crazy stuff, right? So it's deliberately designed to be a multi-purpose tool. Now, there are an application for either one of the two of them. But what I want you to walk away from in terms of this episode is there's a reason why it's so much easier to sell hammers than it is Swiss Army knife. It goes beyond that as well also, because it's easier to figure out how quickly a hammer is able to provide you with value, despite the fact that the Swiss Army knife arguably does considerably more. Now, that analogy is something I see all the time, but it's something I see in software. And I feel like it's actually an easier mistake to make in the virtual or digital space, software space. There is a desire oftentimes to want to create software that can do all the things, right? Including the spinning rims. My point here is that the more you build software that does more and more or offers more features and functionality, the less likely it is to A, be used, and B, provide value. Now, why is that? Because that seems counterintuitive. Well, it is. You would think that more functionality means more value, right? And at least on paper and logically, you'd probably be right. But the problem is we're building for people. If you know anything about human psychology, we quickly become overwhelmed with choice. So too much choice is actually a bad thing. There have been studies done, for example, in like supermarkets where they're handing out free samples, and they've compared someone handing out 3 options versus someone handing out like 12. You might interpret that to mean if I'm going to offer more options, I'm going to give away more free samples and then ultimately sell more product. The exact opposite is the case. The person that is offering less options not only gives away more free samples, but sells more product. So the question is why? And the reason is because people are not as overwhelmed deciding between that many choices. So more often than not, typically speaking, less choices are better because people could figure it out for themselves more quickly. When it's something new, think about it yourself, like figuring out how to use one of these tools, for example. If it's something new, would you rather do something rather simple or something very complicated or many things that are rather complicated in terms of you figuring out how to use something that's brand new to you? The same thing applies in software. And the more features and functionality you add to your software product, the more overwhelming it's going to be for people to try to figure it out. Now, I'm not saying that you don't ever add extra functionality to your product. That's not the case either. What I'm saying is when you're starting out, the simpler you can make the initial version of your software, the better. Because, much like the hammer, people are going to be able to figure out what it is, how it works, how to use it, when they need it, how to get value out of it. All of those are really important for the initial experience your customer wants to have with your product. And you want this too. You want them to use it because they know what it is, they know that they need it, which makes it easier to market to them, which it makes it easier for them to understand the value they're going to get. Then you want them to get value out of it. Once they get value out of it, now you've got them as a loyal customer that they know you have provided value to them. They've exchanged funds for value, and the relationship is off to a great start. Now, once they have been a customer and they've gotten value as they're growing and their needs change and evolve, they are more than likely to come back to you with, hey, by the way, I also have a bunch of screws. I need to screw those in. What do you got? You can go ahead and you can add the screwdriver, right? You can add step number 2. That enables you to continue to grow, continue to provide them with more value, which is what they're looking for, but in sequence, not in parallel. So if you had offered the two of those together as a package, might not sell as many as you would have had you started with one and then eventually added the other. So the lesson here is resist the urge to make your software more complex and more feature rich. Start simpler, and that's going to help you make progress much more quickly. You're going to wind up where you want to be faster. I almost can guarantee that. It certainly has worked for me and my products. But the simpler that you start out with the features and functionality you're providing for your customers and how specific the problems are that you're solving for a specific target market, the easier it is for you to get your software off the ground. Once it's off the ground and you have happy paying customers, that's when you can learn more about where to go next. And then you can keep doing that in perpetuity as your product continues to add more value and you continue to add more happy paying customers.